Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zafar Iqbal. Today is 25th of July 2023, and this is a level 7 course on strategic leadership. And today's session is going to be based on the impact of leadership on organizational performance. We're going to be talking about the LO3. Yesterday we covered LO2, and prior to that we covered LO1. However, since due to my sickness, I couldn't cover the LO2 the other day. So we're falling one session behind. So we'll try and cover that when we get the time. Okay, so we look at the impact of leadership on organizational performance today. Now, there are 3 learning assessment criteria here. The first one is to look at the nature of organization's effectiveness and performance. The session on this we'll talk about now. Okay, the AC2, which is the learning assessment criteria number 2, is going to be looking at the main features and requirements of leadership, i.e. critically exploring the main features and requirements of leadership development. And the learning assessment criteria number 3 talks about assessing an organization's strategic effectiveness from a leadership perspective. So let's start with 3.1. We're looking at the assessing the nature of organization's effectiveness and performance. So first of all, we need to look at the difference. What is effectiveness and what is efficient? Okay. Throughout the lesson, we'll be looking at the effectiveness and performance, and this we need to distinguish between effectiveness and efficiency. We need to look at the culture and creativity. We need to look at the innovation, some models of excellence, McKinsey's model, for example, or Peter and Waterman's model, or learning organizations. We'll talk about this. So let's start with what is efficient and what is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. When we talk about efficient, we mean doing some work, for example, or doing performing a kind of function in the best possible manner with the least cost, the less waste of time and more effort. Okay, efficient, i.e. you're wasting less time, you're doing the best through cost savings and doing the things right way. Okay, effective is being effective means doing the things the right way. Okay, adequate to accomplish a purpose. Okay, so effective and efficient are 2 different things. Effective means you're doing the right thing. Efficient means you're doing the right thing, but things are put right and with the best possible possible way. Okay, so that's the difference between those 2 words. Okay, so when we're talking about the organizational effectiveness and performance, we mean how the organizations can produce a particular product or particular effect, okay, on an organization that is least wastage of time, that is producing without wastage, in other words. So when we are talking about the organizational effectiveness, we mean a product is produced without waste. Okay, when we are talking about the organizational effectiveness, we mean the desire to produce results with a minimum expenditure of energy, time, money, materials, costs, and so on. Okay, when we are talking about organizational effectiveness, we mean making some kind of a profitable product. We may sure that the organization is making a good profit, i.e. it's producing it efficiently, effectively as well. So this relates to economics. This relates to the term relates to economics in the sense that maximizing profit by producing products without wastage of time and without wastage of materials and without wastage of money. So these performances or this performance measurement, there are a lot of different techniques we can use. There are a lot of different ways we can use to measure performance. Okay. There are financial techniques, there's balance marking techniques. So financial, for example, we can measure performance by different ratios, for example, profitability ratios, liquidity ratios, risk ratios, capital growth ratios, using assets efficiently. We can use a number of ratios to measure the profitability, liquidity, the usage of capital, the usage of fixed assets in an organization, and we can see through that. Okay, we can use non-financial measurement techniques like productivity, quality measurement techniques. You can use balanced scorecards, for example, customer feedback. We can use financial and non-financial in the sense that learning and growth. We can use benchmarking techniques, internal functional benchmarking or strategic benchmarking. So there are various techniques. There are many, many different techniques for performance measurement. Okay. One of the most common one is the balanced scorecard technique that's been developed by Kaplan and Norton in 1996. This is very famous. It measures financial, right? It measures non-financial. It looks at customers. So financial, financial measurement, it looks at how financially should we appear to our shareholders. So you can look at the financial measurements of, through finances and through being efficient through finances. We can look at the customers being, to how far are we achieving our vision, how far are we achieving our meeting our customers' needs, for example. There are internal processes, for example, looking at the shareholders and customers. Are we satisfying our needs of the shareholders or satisfying the needs of the customers? And what processes we must, excel in, we must follow, we must go through. And there's another one, learning and growth, for example. To what extent are we achieving our vision? How well are we sustaining our ability to change and improve others? You can look at the qualitative measurement. You can look at the quantitative measures in terms of scorecards. There are direct measures, and there are indirect measures. There are lead measures. There are lag measures or indicators, as they call them. So there are different ways of measuring effectiveness and efficiency of an organization. Okay, you can look at the budgets, for example, monitoring targets against the actual results. Performance management also looks at the short-term objectives, SMART objectives, customer satisfaction, cost control, long-term measures. So therefore, there is no one way to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of an organization. It depends on the goals of business. Every business will vary in their size, in their outlook, in their business, the type of business they are operating. They are looking at the, whether they are looking for maximizing their profit for shareholders or for themselves, or looking at the maximization of market, or they are satisfying the government departments, or what is their objective, what's their what are there for, what is their vision. So it depends on different businesses. When we are looking at the businesses, what are their long-term goals, what are the long-term objectives of these organizations. So every business is quite different. So we can use different measurements, different performance measurements to look at different businesses. Okay. By performance measurement is what we mean by performance measurement is we look at the efficient use of resources, for example, to achieve organizational goals in terms of planning, in terms of organizing, leading and controlling resources. So we can, when we are talking about performance measurement, this is what we are looking. This is the planning or organizing and leading and controlling through these resources, and we must make sure that these are used, to the best of the organization to achieve its objectives. Peter Drucker, for example, he's one of the leading management experts, and he says management is tasks. Okay, management is a discipline, but management is also people, and every achievement of management is the achievement of a manager. Every failure is a failure of manager. So when we looking at the significance of management or the social history, we are looking at the whether manager is a successful manager or fail in terms of its performance. So this is the management by performance. Management by performance, they look at the ability of people to motivate different people in terms of hierarchy, in terms of the results, in terms of the rewards. The people's abilities in terms of role and place and job. And this is focused on the individual, the ability to work and the role. So this is based on the individual person rather than the whole organization. When we're talking about the leadership, we are talking about the skills, knowledge, for example, the skills and the type of people, the relationship and the group relationship and the group size and the cohesiveness and the systems and structure. So the leadership looks at the whole system and the whole organization rather than the ability to do one individual. So the leadership looks at the effectiveness of the whole organization as such. Okay, it looks at the economic environment, it looks at the physical environment, it looks at the technological environment, and it looks at the leadership style, it looks at the systems, it looks at the group relation, it looks at the leadership itself. So this combined with this, combined with the leadership, with the economic environment, with the organization, and the ability to motivate others, together we look at the effectiveness of the organization. Okay, these are some of the factors that can influence the performance of an organization. Other elements of organizational performance depend on the purpose. For example, what's the purpose? What is their what's the purpose of the organization? Is it to maximize profit for the shareholders? Is it to increase their wealth, or is it to increase the customer satisfaction? Is it to produce new goods and services? Is it to satisfy the needs of the customers, or is it to satisfy the needs of owners, or what? We can look at the organizational performance in terms of policies and culture. Policies and culture, is the customer service an appropriate level? We can look at the strategy. We can look up, is the product, for example, being provided in the manner it intended, or we can look at the value in terms of what is the level of staff, for example, staff turnover, is the morale high, or is the morale low for the people working there, right? Cost principles of the business, are they maintained or not maintained? We can look at the bias, for example, as bias for action, as Peters and Waterman determine in terms of their efficiency. Now they are the people who have determined the different aspects of organizational inefficiencies, and they say bias, for example, bias for action is one of the elements in terms of organizational efficiency. Whether that's true or whether not, right? Closeness to the customer, autonomy, productivity through people, for example, or a strong value system, simple organizational culture, decentralization. Now all these elements, there are 8 elements that they are talking about on culture that are identified in terms of efficiency, organizational efficiency. So this is some kind of elements that they determine as if efficiency in terms of or effectiveness and efficiency. The other thing is innovation and creativity. To what extent an organization is being creative or being innovative. Now, innovation looks at putting things in ideas or approaches into action, innovation, right? And this is commonly described as the commercially successful exploitation of ideas, i.e. successful innovation is mainly about creating or adding value to the product or process innovation, okay, or developing new products and making sure that value is added, or right, not previously added, but added value to the product innovation. Okay, so that's very important when we look at the product organizational efficiency. Okay, new ideas, new approach to innovation and activity. Okay, now creativity also looks at the process of being innovative, looks at the process inside the business and looks at the process outside the business. Now, inside the business, it looks at employees from employees' viewpoint, or in-house designers' viewpoint, or sales staff, for example. The idea may come from different sources, from different people inside the organization, or it can come from the outside organization, or it can come from the outside the business. For example, customer, it can come from the creativity, ideas can come from suppliers, it can come from reports, it can come from published sources, it can come from research, it can come from other organizations, very competing organizations, or it can include some kind of surveys and so on and so forth. The ideas can float around from external sources, and we can apply those ideas to our resources, and we can exploit these resources to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of organization ourselves. Okay, now the benefits of creativity, or the benefit include some kind of increased productivity, lowering of costs, and, for example, building a proper and good brand, looking at the higher profits and higher sales, making sure that the costs decline, and we can increase our effectiveness in terms of all these resources, using the resources to the maximum with lowest of cost, and making sure that we stay competitively advantaged over our competitors. We can use McKinsey's 7S model in order to stay effective and competitive. We can see from this viewpoint that there are 7 elements, like structure and like systems and style and shared values, staff, skill, and strategy. So this model can be used in terms of being effective and being efficient when we are looking at the performance. Okay, and we can look at the other model in this chart. Okay, you can see that individual improvement, how we can track down the performance of individual people, how successful factors are implemented in terms of organizational vision, in terms of the departmental vision, and leading through the individual improvement. Okay, we can also use the performance by looking at the departmental success factors, and we can look at the organizational success factors in terms of departments, in terms of the organizational improvement. There are many different factors, and they all feed in to the successful factors, into the department vision, and to the organizational vision. So we must, when we are looking at the performance, there are different measures we can use. Another measure we can look at is the successful factors. Okay, critical successful factor, or CSF factors, which identifies and uses CFS to build accountability in terms of performance management. And you can find some information on searching for impact and Mark Samuel model using the CSF. Okay, so you can look at the critical success factor, choosing new roles, and you can use these models to look at. Another model we can look at is performance management models like a European Framework for Quality Management, EFQM model that you can use. And this builds on the Total Quality Management, TQM model. So this is, as a model can be used to assess organizations in terms of innovation, in terms of its learning, in terms of its leadership, in terms of its processes, and in terms of key performance results. So you can use these models to measure performance measurement of an organization. So 3.1 basically, when we are talking about the performance and effectiveness and performance measurement, we are talking about different measurements, different models, different terms that we use to look at performance measurement. Okay, so basically this was 3.1 was here. Okay, to look at being effective and being efficient, and what's the nature of being effective and being efficient. So we can use different models. We found the different model used for different techniques. We said we can use financial measures or non-financial measures to measure performance. Okay, we use the balance scorecard, or we looked at the performance measurement using the individual and using the effectiveness of organizations and external and internal elements of organization. We looked at the 7S model, as well as balance scorecard and critical success factors, and what you call them EFQM model as a part of the total quality management. Okay, so let's move on to 3.2, which looks at the critical exploration of these measure main features and requirements of the leadership development, i.e. We want to look at the main features and requirements of leadership development. Now, leadership development mainly talks about developing the leaders, developing the leadership in themselves through different means of training, for example, different means of coaching, different types of planning, successful planning or succession planning, career planning, making sure that using and giving them support, giving them empowerment. Leadership development looks at leaders, to improving the leaders' skills and abilities and confidence, rather than the individuals. Okay, the leadership is in terms of their development, okay, in terms of their career, in terms of their moving within the organization and developing their ability to become better leaders. Okay, so this is the leadership. The leadership therefore refers to different activities of leaders to improve their skills and abilities, and to create confidence and to empower them through different types of development skills and so on. Okay, and now, according to Baldwin, the success of leadership depends on quality of the program. Okay, the level of support they receive, the level of support they receive from their maybe superiors, or from their team, for example, or their learning style, for example. It depends on these types of factors. Okay, but some commentators differentiate between leadership development and leader development. Now, leadership development looks at the programs, okay, which focus on the leadership in an organization, rather than looking at the individuals on their own. Okay, so the leadership develops the whole thing. It's a whole process. It looks at the whole organizational planning, successful planning, okay, rather than developing the individual. Therefore, it's very important, and the leadership development programs are very important in terms of producing the leaders to what you call them, to take over the responsibilities of senior management in organizations, so they become competent managers in organizations rather than competent individuals, right? So competent individuals, fine, but it develops the organization as a whole rather than the individuals. So programs are very important, and they are very much geared towards achieving goals and long-term goals, and rather than shorter terms. Okay, so this is very important. So that we need to distinguish between a leadership development and a leader development. Okay, so the leadership development looks at the process of developing high caliber leaders to take over senior positions when they become vacant, rather than focusing on the individual. Okay, and looks at the long-term aims and goals of the organization. Okay, you can look at the leadership development model in terms of on the job, on the job or off the job. For example, on the job can be practical experience, and off the job can be classroom training, or through guidance, through coaching, through mentoring, and it is about developing competencies. It is developing, looking at how good you can become as a leader, and how effective you can be as a leader. Okay, you can use a leadership development model in terms of learning for self, or you can look at learning for self, which means that you can develop yourself in terms of setting goals for yourself, for your development, and for your mentoring, for your supporting, learning for self, right? So this can be a personal development plan, or it can be a critical reflection and insight in terms of accountability and responsibility for your own practice, being proactive, being more aware of your own impact on others. You can become better in terms of developing strategies, for example, working with strategic and political intent, building up relationships, healthy relationship, or developing emotional intelligence, looking at different types of strategies you can use to develop leadership. Or you can, enable others. For example, you can enable others to build upon your team, or develop leadership in others, right? You can coach others, for example, or give and receive feedback to others. Okay, so there are different leadership development models you can use. Yeah, you can use for self, you can use for self, or you can enable others, or you can look at the strategies, and you can also reflect on your own critical and insight upon yourself. Okay, so that was 3.2, was basically was to look at exploring the main features and requirements of leadership development. So self, others, different strategies, different behaviors, and it can be off job and on job, and through classroom, and through coaching, and through mentoring, and to develop the competencies and requirements of job. And the main purpose is to develop yourself and develop others as well, by different means and different terms. Okay, and you look at these different models in itself. 3.3 basically looks at the criteria for assessing an organization's strategic effectiveness from a leadership viewpoint. Now we can do that by looking at different models. For example, again, we can look at the EFQM excellence model, or balanced scorecard, or strategy maps. So this can be a criteria for assessing an organization's strategic effectiveness. So, for example, strategic capabilities is one way we can use to provide a criteria for assessing an organization's strategic effectiveness. Okay, now this can be to look at the different strategic capabilities in terms of organizational resources and competencies, and how they relate to the strategies of the organization. What it means is what are our capabilities, what are our resources, and what are competencies in terms of human resources and so on. Okay, and how we can use these to achieve organizational objectives and okay, so this is we need to look at the resources that we have, whether we are capable or not to achieve the organizational objectives. Okay, we can look at the strategic capabilities in terms of Vario model, value, rarity, imitatability, and organizational support in terms of Vario model. You can look at the Vario analysis in terms of benchmarking, look at the SWOT analysis. We can look at the mapping, activity mapping, or developing, many strategic capabilities for, people like manage how they use their strategic capabilities for their own organization. So there are different strategic capabilities in terms of in terms of the organizations and how they can be used. For strategic capabilities, the key issues are we'll need to look at the our own capabilities in terms of strategic abilities. What are our strategic capabilities, and how do we contribute to being competitive advantage? How do these strategic capabilities contribute to being competitive and being better than other organizations in terms of its performance, in terms of using resources, in terms of efficiently using the resources, and how do we diagnose strategic abilities? What are the skills? What are the models? What are this? How do we do this? What are the resources we can use to diagnose? What are the models? What do we have the capabilities? And how do we manage the development of strategic capabilities? Okay, we can look at a resource-based strategy. Now, resource-based strategy is one of the strategies that looks at how organization or we can stay competitive in terms of using our resources, in terms of using our capabilities, in terms of using our resources to the betterment of organizations. Okay, so this is the resource-based RBV. Okay, RBV, resource-based view. We can use that to develop our being efficient. Another thing we can use, or resources and competencies, we can use strategic capabilities. These are the capabilities of an organization which contribute to the long-term survival of the organization in terms of being competitive, in terms of being competent, in terms of using the resources efficiently again, and what we have and what we are capable, and how can we use our assets, and how how we can become better in terms of competing with our suppliers, in terms of partners, or using their resources to stay competitive, in other words. So this is this can tell us how we can use our assets to the best ability of ourselves. Okay, we can use components of a strategic capability. These include like physical components, like human components, like the financial components. Now, physical components consist of, for example, resources, materials, products, machines and buildings. How efficiently are we using these resources to stay competitive? In how are we using our machinery? We can look at being employing this machinery to the best of our ability, whether it's returning good return, whether the machine being utilized fully, is it producing good productivity, is it the cost? So how well are we using our plant, and how well are we using our physical capability? Are the rooms engaged all the time, for example, or the physical resources being used how well our computer systems or how well our human resources, for example, used in terms of being in terms of being experienced, or in terms of building up relationships, or in terms of motivating others, and in terms of developing new products. Are we relating good to our suppliers, or we relating good to our customers, employees, partners? And financial terms, in are we using our funds to the best of our abilities? You know, we're looking at the cash flow system, working capital, asset utilization. You know, are we managing the funds as best as we can? Are we getting return on money that we've invested? Ability to raise finances for the best of ability to the organization. So are we keeping our controls, debt control? Are we trying to make best use of credit control system, and so on? So all this is strategic capability. All these are components of strategic ability, and these can be used for a long-term survival and to the competitive advantage of the organization. Okay, so this is very important, and to know that how far, how better, how good, or how efficiently we're using the resources for the organization. Okay, now it's a very a succinct and very quick lecture on this, understanding the impact of leadership. So the impact of leadership is very important on the organization for performance, in terms of being the leadership being efficient, in terms of reducing costs, and making sure that the resources are used to the best abilities of the organization. Okay, and this is the important bit. Okay, so we looked at 3 different criterias, and you are turn to look at the resources that there are on the Moodle. For example, there are ebooks, there are internet links, there are resources that you can use in terms of looking at this looking at this subject. So we've got some books, like you can look at the books in terms of www.tutor2u. You can look up efficiency and effectiveness, and you can see some models. You can look up CIMA for this topic, CIMA, cima.org.uk, or businessteachers.org.uk. You can look up different topics under effectiveness and efficiency, and the models that you used. So the there are some readings, for example, reading on this topic is Johnson and Scholes and Whittington, Exploring Corporate Strategy. You can look up a very good book like this, or you can read other books by Hill, International Business, and there are other couple of books that you can go through and look at the topic in detail. Okay, if there are any questions, please fire or write to me, and I'll endeavor to answer those. If you haven't, and then I'll see you with another session soon. Thank you very much for joining. Have a good day. Bye-bye.